Hi guys and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight we slip quietly into a small American home in the early 1940s where the morning has not fully arrived, and yet the world is already awake in a cautious, half-hidden way. You lie still for a moment, not because you are well rested, but because the room feels different than it once did. The light is dim, softened by heavy blackout curtains that cover the windows like thick, watchful eyelids. Even at dawn, the house seems to prefer shadows now. You take a slow breath and notice the air carries a faint mix of soap fabric and something metallic that seems to linger everywhere these days, as if the war itself has found a way inside. You probably would not survive this comfortably, not in the way you are used to. Convenience has been carefully folded away, replaced by routines that feel both ordinary and quietly demanding. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share your location and the time where you are right now. Now, dim the lights. The house settles around you as you finally sit up. The mattress shifts with a soft creak beneath your weight, and for a moment you just listen. There is no distant hum of appliances, no easy background noise. Instead, the morning announces itself in smaller ways. A floorboard sighs somewhere down the hall. A pipe taps once, then twice. From outside, a muted sound of a passing vehicle reaches you quieter than it should be, as though even the street understands the need to keep things subdued. A widely accepted historical detail explains that blackout measures were encouraged in many American communities during World War II, especially along the coast, to reduce the risk of enemy detection. Even in places far from an immediate threat, families often followed these guidelines with surprising seriousness. You can feel that seriousness now in the way the curtains are pinned tight, leaving no careless sliver of light. You reach toward the small bedside table, your fingers brushing against objects that have become part of your daily awareness. There is a folded ration book, its edges slightly worn, its pages holding more authority than its size suggests. Next to it sits a simple alarm clock, its ticking steady and unbothered marking time, in a world that feels anything but steady. When you stand, the floor is cool beneath your feet. You move slowly, not out of laziness, but because everything feels just a little heavier than it used to. The day ahead is already forming in your mind, shaped by what you can and cannot use, what you must save, and what you will need to go without. In the hallway, the light is softer still. Someone else is already awake. You can tell by the faint sound of movement from the kitchen, a cupboard opening, the careful placement of a pot. The rhythm is familiar, practiced, almost quiet enough to go unnoticed if you are not listening for it. As you walk, your hand briefly trails along the wall, feeling the slight unevenness of paint that has been applied more than once, each layer covering an older version of the home. It is a small thing, but it reminds you how time accumulates here, not in grand gestures, but in repeated adjustments. There is a lesser-known anecdote from this période that some families treated blackout curtains almost like a nightly ritual, checking them with the same care one might give to locking doors. Children were sometimes tasked with inspecting edges for stray light, turning safety into a kind of game even as the adults understood the deeper tension beneath it. You can imagine that here in this house, that same quiet inspection has happened more than once. You step into the kitchen and the warmth meets you gently. It is not a strong heat, but it is enough to make the space feel lived in. The table is already set with simple items, a few plates, a cup waiting to be filled, a small jar that once held something sweeter now repurposed for whatever is available. The person at the stove glances at you, offering a brief nod that replaces any need for a long greeting. Words feel unnecessary this early. There is an understanding that settles between you without effort. The day has begun, and that is enough. The smell of breakfast is subtle. It does not carry the richness you might expect. Instead, it feels measured, thoughtful. Every ingredient seems to have been considered before it was used. You notice how carefully things are portioned, how nothing spills over, how nothing is wasted. You take a seat, the wooden chair firm beneath you. As you wait, your eyes drift toward the window, though there is little to see. The curtain holds its place, blocking the outside world. For a moment you wonder what the street looks like right now. Whether the sky is already bright. Whether others are moving through the same quiet routines behind their own covered windows. Some researchers have long debated how much of the American Homefront experience was shaped by real threat versus perceived danger, especially in inland regions where direct attacks were unlikely. Still, the emotional atmosphere was undeniable. Even when the risk was distant, the feeling of participation in something vast and uncertain made every small action feel significant. The cup is placed in front of you. Steam rises gently, carrying a scent that is familiar, but slightly altered. Coffee, perhaps, but not quite as you remember it. You take a sip and notice the difference immediately. It is thinner, less bold, softened by substitutes that stretch what little is available. You do not comment on it. There is no need. The quiet continues as you eat each Homefront unhurried. Outside, the day is slowly expanding, though you only sense it through the gradual shift in the light that presses faintly against the curtain. Time moves forward, whether you mark it or not. As you sit there, you begin to realize that this is how the war lives here. Not in explosions or distant battlefields, but in the careful way you hold a cup in the measured portion of food on your plate in the dimness of a room that chooses caution over brightness. You finish your meal and rest your hands lightly on the table. The wood beneath your fingers feels worn but steady, shaped by years of use and now by the added weight of these days. There is more to come. There is always more to come. And as you rise from your chair, preparing to step fully into the day, you carry with you that quiet understanding. That life here is not paused, not broken, but gently reshaped. Adjusted in ways that ask for patience, attention, and a kind of endurance that does not announce itself loudly. It simply continues. You remain in the kitchen as the rhythm of the morning settles more firmly into place, and what felt quiet a moment ago begins to reveal its structure. The table is still in front of you, but now it feels less like a resting point, and more like a kind of workspace where every small decision carries weight. You notice how nothing here is casual. Even the simplest act of preparing breakfast has been shaped by limits that sit just beneath the surface of everything. The person beside the stove moves with a kind of practiced care, reaching for ingredients that are already measured in the mind before they are measured by hand. A small tin is opened, then closed again quickly, as if exposure alone might diminish what remains inside. You watch this without speaking, your attention drawn to the quiet precision of it all. A commonly accepted historical reality is that rationing became a central part of daily life in the United States during World War II, with items like sugar, butter, meat and coffee strictly controlled through government-issued coupons. Each household received ration books, and every purchase had to be carefully accounted for. It was not just about what you could afford anymore, but what you were permitted to use. You glance again at the ration book you brought with you, now resting near your plate. It looks unremarkable, almost modest, yet it governs so much of what happens in this room. You can feel its presence even when you are not holding it. It shapes meals before they are planned. It decides what flavours are possible and which must be remembered instead of tasted. Breakfast is placed in front of you and you take a moment before beginning. The portions are smaller than what might have once been considered normal, though normal itself has shifted so gradually that it is difficult to say exactly when the change took hold. You lift your utensil and begin the texture of the food slightly different from what you might expect. There is a softness where there should be richness, a faint sweetness where there should be depth. You realize that substitutions have become an art form here. Ingredients are replaced, stretched, or combined in ways that aim to preserve the idea of a meal, even when the original components are no longer available. There is an interesting lesser-known detail that many households experimented with creative alternatives during this time, such as using grated vegetables and baked goods to compensate for reduced sugar, or blending different grains to extend flour supplies. Some recipes circulated informally, passed from neighbour to neighbour, each one adjusted slightly depending on what could be found. You take another bite and notice that the flavour is not unpleasant. It is simply different. It asks you to adjust your expectations rather than reject it outright. In a strange way, there is a quiet satisfaction in that adjustment, as if learning to accept less is itself a small achievement. Across from you, the morning continues without urgency. There is no rushing to finish, no sense that the day must be seized quickly. Instead, everything unfolds at a pace that feels deliberate, as though moving too fast would risk overlooking something important. You reach for your cup again, taking another sip of the altered coffee. The warmth spreads through you, steady and familiar, even if the taste has changed. You find yourself focusing less on what is missing and more on what remains. The heat, the ritual, the pause it creates between one moment and the next. Some scholars continue to debate how rationing affected morale on the home front, with some arguing that it fostered a sense of shared sacrifice, while others suggest it quietly deepened frustration, especially in communities where access to goods was already uneven. You can sense both possibilities here woven into the same quiet morning. There is acceptance, but also something unspoken beneath it. The kitchen itself reflects this balance. The shelves are not empty, but they are carefully managed. Items are spaced out, not crowded together. Each jar, each container seems to have a purpose that extends beyond its immediate use. Nothing feels temporary. Everything feels considered. You notice a small scrap of paper resting near the edge of the table, covered in neat handwriting. A list, perhaps. Ingredients needed. Coupons to be used. Meals planned several days ahead. It is a map of the future drawn in the language of necessity rather than desire. As you finish eating, you become aware of the subtle sounds that fill the space. The soft scrape of a spoon against a bowl. The gentle clink of a cup being set down. The low hum of someone thinking through the next step before taking it. These sounds replace what might once have been louder, more careless noise. They create a kind of quiet music that belongs entirely to this time. You stand and carry your dish to the sink, feeling the slight resistance of water that is cooler than you might prefer. Even here there is a sense of conservation. You wash slowly, making sure nothing is wasted, your movements mirroring the same care you've seen all morning. The window remains covered, but the light behind it has grown stronger. You can sense the day pressing outward, waiting to be entered. The world beyond this kitchen is already in motion, shaped by the same rules, the same limitations, the same quiet determination. Before stepping away, you glance once more at the table. It looks almost unchanged, yet you know that something has shifted, not in the objects themselves, but in your understanding of them. The meal you just shared was not simply breakfast. It was an act of adjustment, a small negotiation between what is available and what is needed. There is a peculiar, almost forgotten detail that some families save their ration coupons in envelopes labelled for specific weeks, treating them with a level of organisation that resembled financial planning. In a way, they were budgeting not just money, but possibility itself. You can imagine that system here tucked away somewhere just out of sight, quietly guiding the days ahead. You dry your hands and pause for a moment, letting the stillness settle again. The kitchen feels complete now, its task for the morning fulfilled, but the day is only beginning. As you turn toward that doorway, you carry with you the awareness that every meal, every ingredient, every small choice will continue to echo this same careful balance. There is no excess here, no room for thoughtless comfort, and yet there is something steady in that restraint. It holds, it continues, and as you step out of the kitchen, leaving behind the faint warmth and the lingering scent of a meal shaped by a necessity, you move toward the next part of the day with that same quiet understanding. You step out of the kitchen and into the front of the house, where the air feels slightly cooler and the quiet begins to thin. The day is no longer waiting. It is already moving. You reach for your coat, the fabric a little rough against your fingers, and pause for a moment before opening the door. There is a small familiar hesitation there, not quite fear, but something close to awareness. Outside is no longer just outside. It is part of something larger now. The door opens with a soft click, and the world greets you in a muted way. The street is alive, but not loudly so. Movement replaces sound as the first thing you notice. People are already in motion, stepping along sidewalks, crossing intersections, gathering at corners where routines intersect. No one lingers without reason. Even stillness seems temporary, as if everyone is simply between one task and the next. The morning light has fully arrived, though it feels gentler than you expected after the dimness inside. It spreads across the buildings in a pale wash, catching on windows and door frames, revealing details that might otherwise go unnoticed. The houses look the same as they always have, but there is a subtle shift in how they are used. Curtains remain drawn longer than before. Doors open and close more quickly. Conversations happen closer to thresholds, rarely spilling too far into the open. A widely recognized aspect of wartime America was the restructuring of daily schedules to support industrial production, especially in towns connected to factories or transportation lines. Work shifts often began earlier and ended later, creating a constant flow of people moving through public spaces at all hours. You can feel that change here in the steady stream of bodies moving with purpose, each one part of a larger rhythm that does not pause. You step onto the sidewalk and fall into that rhythm without needing to think about it. Your pace adjusts almost immediately, matching the movement around you. There is comfort in that alignment, even if it leaves little room for wandering thought. The street carries you forward. A streetcar passes at the far end of the block, its metal frame catching the light as it glides along the tracks. The sound it makes is softer than you might expect, more of a steady hum than a sharp clatter. You watch as people gather near the stop, some already waiting, others arriving just in time. There is no rush to board, but there is no delay either. Each movement feels measured, practiced, as though everyone has learned exactly how long they can afford to pause. You approach the stop yourself, joining the small group that has formed there. No one speaks immediately. There is a shared understanding that words are not necessary this early. Instead, you notice the details. A man adjusting his hat with quiet precision. A woman holding a folded newspaper against her side, her fingers resting along its edge, as if ready to open it at any moment. A child shifting from one foot to the other, trying to match the stillness of the adults and not quite succeeding. There is a curious detail from this time that many cities encouraged carpooling and public transit use to conserve fuel and rubber for the war effort. Posters and announcements reminded citizens that even small acts of cooperation could support the larger cause. You can see the result of that effort here, not in any single action, but in the collective way people choose to move together rather than apart. The streetcar arrives and the doors open with a soft mechanical sigh. You step inside along with the others, finding a place to stand as the space fills quickly. The interior smells faintly of metal fabric and something else that is harder to name, perhaps the accumulated presence of many different lives passing through the same narrow space. As the car begins to move, you feel the gentle shift beneath your feet. The motion is steady, almost soothing as it carries you through the streets. Outside, the city unfolds in fragments. Shop windows, signs, people crossing from one side to the other. Everything passes in a sequence that feels both continuous and slightly distant, as though you are watching rather than participating. You glance at the newspaper now being opened beside you. The pages rustle softly, revealing headlines that speak of places far beyond this street. Names of cities you may never see. Numbers that attempt to measure something too large to fully understand. The war is there, printed in ink, condensed into lines that try to make sense of movement, conflict, and loss. Some historians continue to question how much information reached the average American accurately, and how much was shaped by censorship and morale concerns. Even so, the presence of the news itself was enough to keep the war close, folding distant events into the fabric of everyday life. You do not need to read every word to feel its weight. The streetcar slows as it approaches the next stop, and a few people step off while other viewers take their place. The flow continues without interruption. You hold onto the rail, your hand steady as the motion carries you forward again. A conversation begins quietly near the back, two voices speaking in low tones about something that seems both ordinary and important. You catch only fragments, a mention of hours, a reference to someone leaving soon, a brief pause that suggests more is understood than is said. The words themselves are simple, but the meaning beneath them feels layered. As you near your stop, you prepare to step off, shifting your weight slightly as the car begins to slow once more. The doors open, and you return to the street, the ground firm beneath your feet after the gentle sway of the ride. The air feels different here, closer to the centre of activity. Buildings rise a little taller. The sounds are a bit more pronounced. You can hear the distant echo of machinery, the faint whistle of something beginning or ending, marking time in a way that the quiet house never could. You move forward with the others, your path now aligned with theirs. There is no clear signal that tells you exactly where to go. You simply follow the flow, trusting that it will carry you where you need to be. And as you walk, you begin to understand that this is how the day unfolds here. Not in isolation, but in connection. Each step linked to another. Each movement part of a larger pattern that stretches beyond what you can see. The street does not ask for your attention. It holds it. It guides you forward steady and unbroken into whatever comes next. The closer you move, the more the sound gathers around you, no longer distant or abstract, but immediate and constant. It begins as a low vibration beneath your feet, then rises into something sharper layered mechanical. By the time you reach the factory gates, the noise has become a presence of its own, filling the air with a rhythm that does not pause. People converge here from every direction, their steps aligning without coordination, their movements shaped by a shared urgency that feels both practiced and inevitable. You slow slightly as you approach the entrance, not because you wanted to, but because the flow demands it. A line forms, then dissolves, then reforms again as each person passes through. The gate itself stands solid and unremarkable, yet it marks a clear boundary. Outside, the world still holds fragments of quiet. Inside, everything accelerates. You step forward and cross that threshold. The shift is immediate. The air changes first. It is warmer, thicker, carrying the scent of oil metal, and something faintly sharp that lingers at the back of your throat. Then the sound surrounds you completely. Machines pulse and turn their movements precise and relentless. There is no single noise you can focus on. Instead, it is a layered chorus of grinding, clanking humming, each part blending into something continuous. You hesitate for just a moment, your body adjusting to the scale of it all. A broadly recognized truth of the American wartime economy is that industrial production expanded at an extraordinary pace during the early 1940s, transforming factories into round-the-clock operations that supplied weapons, vehicles, and equipment for the war effort. Facilities that once produced civilian goods were retooled, their purpose reshaped almost overnight. You can feel that transformation here not as a concept, but as a physical force pressing in from all sides. You move deeper inside, following the path that others seem to know instinctively. The floor beneath you is firm, worn smooth in some places, and rough in others, marked by years of movement that have now intensified. Overhead lights hang in long rows, casting a steady brightness that leaves little room for shadow. A supervisor passes by, offering a brief glance that feels more like acknowledgement than inspection. There is no time for prolonged attention. Everyone here is already engaged, already part of the system that keeps everything moving. You find your place along a line of workstations, each one occupied, each one performing a specific task that connects to the next. The object in front of you is not yet complete. It is one piece in a sequence that stretches beyond your sight. You reach for it, your hands adjusting quickly to the feel of its surface, cool and slightly rough. The motion begins almost without the thought. Lift, align, secure, release. The repetition settles into your body faster than you expect. At first it feels deliberate, each movement carefully considered. Then it becomes smoother, less conscious, guided by rhythm rather than decision. The machine beside you responds in kind, its motion syncing with yours in a way that feels both mechanical and strangely cooperative. There is an overlooked but telling detail from this period that many workers developed a kind of physical memory for their tasks, allowing them to maintain speed and accuracy, even in long shifts. The body learned what the mind no longer needed to actively direct. You can sense that process beginning now. your hands moving with increasing confidence as the minutes pass. Around you others are doing the same. There is little conversation, but there is communication in the way people adjust to one another. A slight shift in pace here, a quick correction there. No one announces these changes. They simply happen, maintaining the flow. Time becomes difficult to measure. Without the usual markers of a quieter day, the hours stretch and compress in unpredictable ways. You glance up, occasionally catching sight of a clock mounted high on the wall, its hands moving steadily, though they seem almost disconnected from the experience below. A whistle sounds somewhere in the distance, sharp enough to cut through the constant noise. It signals something, perhaps a shift change, perhaps a break, but the meaning is understood without explanation. A few workers step away, their movement slower now, carrying the weight of repetition in their posture. You remain for a moment longer, finishing the cycle in front of you before stepping back. Your hands feel slightly numb, not from cold, but from sustained effort. You flex your fingers, feeling the sensation return gradually. There is a lesser-known observation that some workers found a quiet sense of pride in these repetitive tasks, knowing that each small action contributed to something far larger than themselves. At the same time, others experienced a kind of fatigue that went beyond the physical, a weariness that settled into the mind as much as the body. You can sense both possibilities here existing side by side, as soon depending on the person, the moment, the day. You move toward a designated break area, joining a small group that has gathered there. The noise softens slightly, though it never fully disappears. Even here, the machines continue their presence constant in the background. Someone takes a seat nearby, their shoulders dropping just enough to suggest relief. Another leans against the wall, eyes closed briefly as if trying to gather a few moments of stillness within the ongoing motion. You sit your body adjusting to the pause. It feels unfamiliar at first, as though stopping requires its own kind of effort. You rest your hands on your knees, noticing the faint traces left behind by the work. A thin layer of dust, a slight warmth that lingers in your skin. Conversations begin in low tones, not animated but steady. A mention of hours worked, a quiet remark about supplies, a brief exchange that carries more meaning than its words suggest. No one speaks loudly. There is no need. The shared experience fills in the spaces between sentences. Some analysts have long considered whether the intense pace of wartime production created lasting changes in American labor culture, influencing expectations of efficiency and endurance even after the war ended. It is difficult to say from this moment alone, but you can feel how quickly these patterns take hold, how naturally they begin to shape behavior. The break does not last long. Another signal, softer this time, passes through the space and people begin to rise almost simultaneously. The return to work is not announced. It is simply understood. You stand with them, your body already remembering the sequence you had begun to learn. As you walk back to your station, the noise grows stronger again, wrapping around you like something familiar now rather than overwhelming. You take your place. The object is there waiting. The motion resumes, and as your hands fall back into rhythm, you realize that this is how the day will continue. Not in sudden shifts, but in steady repetition. Each cycle leading into the next. Each action small on its own, yet essential to the larger whole. The factory does not ask you to reflect, it asks you to continue, and so you do. The rhythm continues, and after a while, you no longer notice when one sequence ends and another begins. Your hands move, the machine answers, and the space between effort and response grows smaller until it almost disappears. What felt loud before now feels structured, almost predictable, as if the factory has taught you how to listen in a different way. You become aware of someone working a few stations over, not because they call attention to themselves, but because their movements are slightly different. There is a steadiness there, but also a kind of deliberate focus that sets them apart. You glance up briefly and see a woman adjusting a piece of equipment with quick, precise hands. Her sleeves roll just enough to keep them clear of the work. You return to your task, but now your awareness has widened. Another broadly documented reality of this period is that millions of American women entered the industrial workforce during World War II, taking on roles that had previously been reserved almost entirely for men. Factories, shipyards, and assembly lines began to reflect this shift. not as an exception but as a new normal. You can see that transformation here not as a headline but as a presence woven into the line of workers around you. The woman you noticed earlier continues without pause, her movements efficient and controlled. There is no hesitation in the way she handles the tools, no visible adjustment period. If anything, there is a quiet confidence that suggests she has been doing this long enough to trust her own rhythm. A small detail often overlooked is that training programs were quickly developed to bring new workers up to speed sometime in a matter of weeks. These programs focused less on theory and more on repetition, allowing people to learn by doing rather than by studying. You can imagine how that approach would shape the way someone carries themselves here, building familiarity through motion rather than instruction. You shift slightly, aligning your pace with the line once more. The coordination between stations becomes clearer the longer you remain. Each person depends on the one before them, and the one after depends on you. There is no single point where the process begins or ends. It exists as a continuous chain held together by attention and timing. The air feels warmer now, or perhaps your body has simply adapted. A faint sheen of effort settles across your skin, not uncomfortable but noticeable. You pause for a brief moment to adjust your grip, then continue your hands returning to their pattern without resistance. Across the floor, a voice rises just enough to be heard over the machinery. It is not loud, but it carries a tone of instruction. Someone is being guided through a step, the explanation brief and direct. There is no room for extended discussion. The learning happens quickly, shaped by a necessity. You glance again toward the woman nearby. She has shifted slightly now, assisting someone else, her gestures clear and efficient. There is no display of authority, only a quiet willingness to share what she knows. The exchange is short, but it leaves behind a sense of continuity, as if knowledge here is passed along in small, steady increments. Some historians continue to examine how this sudden expansion of roles affected gender expectations in the long term, with differing views on whether these changes led to lasting transformation or were largely reversed after the war ended. From where you stand, the question feels distant. What matters here is the immediate reality, the way people adapt to what is needed, regardless of what came before. The hours move forward, though you feel them more in your body than in any clock. Your shoulders carry a slight weight, now your hands a steady fatigue that settles in without complaint. You adjust your stance, shifting your balance just enough to ease the strain, then continue. A whistle sounds again, signaling another pause. This time you step away more quickly, your body recognizing the opportunity for rest. You move toward the same area as before, though it feels different now. Familiar, perhaps in a way that it did not earlier. You sit letting your hands rest in your lap. They feel heavier than before, but also more certain, as if they have learned something they did not know this morning. Around you, others do the same, each person carrying their own version of the same experience. The woman you noticed earlier takes a seat not far from you. Up close, you can see the traces of the work in the small details. A faint mark along her wrist, a smudge that has not quite been wiped away. Her expression is calm, not distant, but focused in a way that suggests she is already preparing for the next stretch of time. There is a lesser-known note from personal accounts of the era that many women balance these demanding factory shifts with responsibilities at home, moving between two very different kinds of labour without a clear boundary between them. The transition from one role to another was not marked by rest, but by continuation. You can sense that possibility here in the way she sits for only a moment before adjusting her posture as if ready to rise again. A brief conversation begins nearby, this time a little more animated than before. Someone mentions a schedule change. Another responds with a quiet acknowledgement, followed by a short pause that suggests more is understood than spoken. There is a rhythm to these exchanges, just as there is in the work itself. You take a slow breath, letting the air settle in your lungs. Even here, away from the immediate line, the presence of the machines remains. It hums beneath everything, a constant reminder that the work continues whether you are part of it in this moment or not. The break ends as all breaks do. You stand, your body responding with a slight delay, then following through. As you return to your station, you notice that the movements come more easily now. The hesitation that marked your first steps has faded, replaced by something steadier. You take your place once more. The object is there waiting again unchanged, yet part of a process that never truly repeats itself in the same way twice. You reach for it, your hands aligning with the task, your mind settling into the rhythm. Around you, the line continues, shaped by many different lives moving in quiet coordination. Some are here for the first time. Others have been here long enough to carry the work in their muscles. Together, they create something that extends far beyond the walls of this building. You do not need to see the final result to understand its significance. It is enough to feel the connection between what you are doing now and what it will become. The factory does not pause to explain this. It simply continues, and you continue with it. The rhythm carries you forward until it becomes something you no longer question, and when the next pause arrives, it feels less like an interruption and more like a gentle shift in direction. You step away from the line again, but this time your body follows the movement with a kind of quiet familiarity, as if it already knows where to go and how long it has. When you step outside the factory doors, the air feels different in a way that is almost surprising. Cooler, lighter, carrying the faint scent of dust and distant greenery. You take a slow breath, and for a moment the weight of the interior noise fades into something softer, something that sits just beyond the edge of your awareness. The street beyond the factory is not empty. It holds a different kind of movement, one shaped by those who are not inside, those whose days' sets follow a different pattern, but are no less connected to the same larger effort. You begin to walk not with urgency, but with a steady pace that feels natural after the hours you have spent in motion. Children appear in small groups along the sidewalks, their presence lighter, less constrained by the strict rhythms of the factory, yet still shaped by the world around them. Some carry books, others small bundles of collected items, their hands filled with objects that seem ordinary until you look more closely. A well-established element of wartime life is that children were actively encouraged to participate in scrap drives, collecting materials such as metal, rubber, and paper to support production needs. These efforts were often organized through schools and community groups, turning everyday objects into contributions to the war effort. You can see that purpose here in the way a group of children gathers around a small pile of collected tin, their voices low but animated. You pass them, noticing the careful way they sort what they have gathered, separating pieces with more attention than you might expect. There is a sense of importance in their movements, as though they understand, at least in part, that what they are doing matters. Further along, you hear the faint echo of a bell signalling the start of the school day. The sound carries across the street, soft but clear, drawing the children toward it. Their pace quickens slightly, though not into a run. Even their urgency feels measured, shaped by routines that have become familiar. A lesser discussed observation from this period is that many children developed a heightened awareness of global events, even when they did not fully understand them. Through posters, lessons, and conversations overheard at home, the war became a constant presence in their imagination. You can sense that here in the way one child pauses briefly looking up at the sky as if expecting something, then continues on without comment. You continue walking your path, taking you past a small residential block where the houses sit close together, their porches holding traces of morning activity. A chair slightly out of place, a folded newspaper left near a door, a pair of shoes waiting to be worn again later in the day. The quiet here feels different from the factory, not empty but layered with the subtle signs of lives unfolding behind walls and windows. You can almost hear the faint sounds within, a radio turned low, a voice speaking in the next room, the soft movement of someone preparing for the next task. You pause for a moment near a fence, your hand resting lightly against its surface. The wood feels warm where the sun has begun to reach it, a contrast to the cool air that still lingers in the shade. It is a small detail, but it draws your attention to the way the day is changing, moving steadily from morning into something fuller. Some researchers continue to explore how wartime conditions influence childhood development, particularly in terms of responsibility and independence. With many adults occupied by long work hours, children often took on additional roles within the household and community. From where you stand, that shift feels visible not in any single action, but in the overall way children carry themselves, slightly more aware, slightly more attuned to what is needed. You resume your walk, turning down a quieter street that leads toward a small open space. Here a few children remain too young, perhaps for school, or simply not yet called inside. They play in a way that blends imagination with imitation. One pretends to march another, to direct their gestures echoing the larger world in simplified form. There is something both tender and unsettling in the scene. The play is not carefree in the way it might once have been. It carries hints of what has been seen, heard, or absorbed from the environment around them. Yet it is still play, still a space where the weight of reality is softened, reshaped into something manageable. You watch for a moment, then continue on your thoughts, lingering on the way the war reaches into even these smallest corners of life, not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently. As you walk, you notice a small poster attached to a nearby pole, its edges slightly worn. The image encourages participation, contribution, vigilance. The message is simple, direct, designed to be understood quickly. You do not stop to read it fully. You do not need to. Its meaning is already familiar. There is a quietly noted fact that schools often incorporated wartime messaging into daily lessons, reinforcing the idea that everyone, regardless of age, had a role to play. Education extended beyond traditional subjects, shaping behavior as much as knowledge. You can imagine that influence carrying through the day, guiding not just what children learn, but how they see themselves within the larger moment. The sound of the factory returns faintly as you draw closer again, its steady pulse re-entering your awareness. The contrast between the two spaces, the structured intensity of work and the softer scattered rhythm of childhood, becomes more apparent. You slow your pace slightly, allowing yourself a final moment of this quieter environment. The open space, the scattered voice, the feeling of a world that continues to hold gentler textures alongside the harder edges. Then you turn back. The path leads you once more toward the place where the day is measured in repetition and precision. As you walk, your body prepares itself, adjusting to the shift before it fully arrives. The doors stand ahead unchanged, the sound grows stronger, and without needing to think about it, you step forward again, ready to rejoin the rhythm that is already waiting for you. You step back inside and the shift happens again, though it feels less abrupt this time. The sound folds around you in a way that is almost expected now, the steady pulse of machines no longer startling, but present like a background you have learned to move within. Your body returns to its place with little hesitation, your hands finding their rhythm more quickly than before. The work resumes, and yet somewhere beneath that rhythm, something else begins to take shape, quieter, slower, not tied to the urgency of production. It follows you even as you move, lingering at the edge of your awareness. It is not part of the factory, but it belongs to the same world. Later, when your shift eases and you step back out once more, that quieter thread becomes clearer. The air greets you again, carrying a different tone, now slightly warmer, touched by the steady rise of the day. You do not head directly home. Instead, your path shifts, guided by something that feels both routine and purposeful. You walk toward a small stretch of land set between rows of houses, a space that might once have been overlooked. Now it holds a different kind of attention. The ground has been turn-shaped into neat rows, each one holding the early signs of growth. You pause at the edge, taking in the sight. A well-documented aspect of life on the American Homefront is the widespread cultivation of what were called victory gardens, small plots where families and communities grew vegetables to supplement their rations. These gardens appeared in backyards, schoolyards, and vacant lots, transforming unused spaces into sources of food and quiet reassurance. You can see that transformation here in the careful order of the rows and the way the soil has been worked with intention. You step closer, your shoes pressing lightly into the earth. The ground feels soft, recently turned, still holding the memory of effort. A few people are already there, moving slowly along the rows, their hands occupied with small, precise tasks. One kneels, adjusting the soil around a cluster of young plants. Another stands nearby, holding a watering can, its contents poured with measured care. There is no rush in their movements. The pace here is different from the factory. It allows for pauses, for small corrections, for attention to detail that unfolds over time, rather than in rapid sequence. You find a place along one of the rows and lower yourself to the ground. The soil is cool beneath your fingers, slightly damp, carrying a scent that feels grounding in a way that the factory air never could. You press your hand lightly against it, feeling its texture, its quiet resistance. A lesser-known detail from this period is that gardening guides were widely distributed to help people make the most of these small plots, offering advice on spacing, timing, and crop selection. Even those with little prior experience were encouraged to participate, turning gardening into a shared learning process that crossed generations. You can imagine those guides nearby, perhaps tucked into a drawer, or folded on a table, their pages worn from repeated use. You begin to work your hands, moving more slowly than they did at the factory, yet no less deliberately. You adjust the soil, clearing small spaces, ensuring that each plant has room to grow. The repetition here feels different. It does not press forward with urgency. It settles, allowing each motion to complete fully before the next begins. Around you, quiet conversations rise and fall softer than those you heard earlier in the day. Someone mentions the weather, another the condition of the soil. The words are simple, but they carry a sense of shared purpose that does not need to be stated directly. You notice how the light falls across the garden, now catching on leaves, casting faint shadows that shift as the sun moves higher. The colours are muted but steady, greens that are not yet fully formed, browns that hold the promise of something more. Some historians continue to examine how much these gardens contributed to actual food supply versus morale, with differing interpretations about their overall impact. From where you sit, the distinction feels less important. What matters is the act itself, the way it draws people into a quieter kind of participation, one that balances the intensity of other parts of the day. You reach for a small tool, its handle worn smooth from use. It fits comfortably in your hand, as though it has already learned the shape of your grip. You use it to loosen the soil, working carefully around the base of a plant that seems slightly more fragile than the others. There is something almost meditative in this. The sounds are softer here. The occasional scrape of metal against earth, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant echo of the factory still present but no longer dominant. It sits at the edge of your awareness, a reminder rather than a demand. You pause for a moment, leaning back slightly, allowing your gaze to move across the rows. Each one is similar, yet not identical. Small differences in growth, in spacing, in the way the soil has been shaped. It reflects the hands that have worked at each person, leaving a subtle mark. A curious anecdote from personal accounts of the time describes how some families took particular pride in their gardens, comparing yields and sharing small successes with neighbours. These exchanges were not competitive in the usual sense, but they carried a quiet satisfaction, a sense that effort could still produce visible results in a world where so much felt uncertain. You return to your task, your movements steady, your attention focused on the small space in front of you. The plant you have been tending now sits more securely in the soil, its leaves slightly lifted as if responding to the care it has received. The work continues in this gentle way, each action building on the last, not in haste but in patience. As time passes, the light shifts again, growing brighter, more direct. The warmth reaches the ground, changing the feel of the soil beneath your hands. You notice the difference immediately, the way the surface dries slightly, the way the scent deepens. Eventually, you begin to rise your body, responding to the subtle signals that it is time to move on. You brush your hands lightly, though traces of the earth remain settled into the lines of your skin. You take one last look at the garden. It does not demand your attention. It holds it quietly, offering a different kind of reassurance than anything you have encountered so far today. Then you turn your steps, leading you away back towards the path that connects all these parts of your day together. The factory, the street, the home, each one different, each one connected. And as you walk, you carry with you the sense that even here, in this small patch of soil, the war has found its way in, not through noise or urgency, but through the steady, patient act of growing what you can. You leave the garden behind, though. A trace of it stays with you, carried in the faint scent of soil on your hands and the slower rhythm it has set in your body. The path draws you back toward the more structured parts of the day, and soon the streets begin to gather that familiar sense of purpose again. This time, however, your destination is not the factory. It is the store. You approach it along with others who seem to have made the same decision at nearly the same hour. The building itself is modest, its windows displaying a careful arrangement of goods that feel both ordinary and quietly limited. Nothing appears excessive, nothing spills beyond its place. A small line has already formed outside. You take your place at the end, your steps slowing naturally as you settle into position. There is no sign that explains how long the wait will be. There does not need to be. Everyone here understands that waiting is part of the process now. An established feature of wartime life was the reliance on ration coupons for essential goods, which meant that even when items were available, they could only be purchased in controlled amounts. This often led to lines forming at stores as people adjusted their schedules around both supply and permission. You can feel that system at work here in the quiet patience of those around you. No one complains, not openly. Instead, there is a kind of shared stillness broken only by small movements. A shift of weight from one foot to the other, the adjustment of a bag held at the side, the brief glance toward the door as it opens and closes, allowing a few people in at a time. You notice how the line is not rigid. It bends slightly as people adjust their spacing, then straightens again without any need for direction. It behaves almost like something alive responding to subtle changes in its environment. A quiet, less widely mentioned detail is that people sometimes developed informal systems of cooperation in these lines, holding places for neighbours, or exchanging information about which stores had received certain items. These small acts of coordination helped ease the uncertainty, even if only slightly. You catch a glimpse of that here as two people near the front exchange a few low words, one nodding in response. The door opens again. A few more steps inside. The line moves forward. You follow your pace, matching the gradual progression. As you reach the entrance, you feel a slight shift similar to the one at the factory, though less intense. Inside the air, is a cooler carrying the faint scent of paper, wood, and packaged goods. The shelves are not empty, but they are not abundant either. Items are spaced out, each one given room as if to emphasize its presence. Labels face forward, neat and orderly, creating a sense of structure that mirrors the system behind it. You move through the aisles, slowly your eyes scanning what is available. Some things are familiar. Others have been replaced by alternatives that serve the same purpose in a different way. A jar that once held something richer now contains a simpler version. A product you might expect to see is absent, its space filled by something less recognizable. You reach into your pocket and feel the ration book there, its presence guiding your choices before you even make them. A commonly accepted observation from the period is that shoppers often plan their purchases carefully in advance, knowing that impulse had little place in a system governed by coupons and availability. Lists were not just helpful, they were necessary. You can sense that preparation here, not only in your own movements, but in the way others navigate the space with quiet intention. You stop near a counter where a clerk stands, their expression calm, their motions efficient. Each transaction is handled with care. Coupons are examined, items are counted. Nothing is rushed yet, nothing lingers longer than it needs to. You step forward when it is your turn, placing your items on the counter. The exchange feels both simple and significant. The clerk takes your ration coupons, glancing at them briefly before setting them aside. There is no conversation beyond what is required, yet the interaction carries a sense of mutual understanding. You are both part of the same system. A point often explored by researchers is how rationing required a high level of public trust and compliance, relying on individuals to follow rules that affected everyone. While enforcement existed, much of the system functioned because people chose to participate in it. You can feel that trust here, quiet but present in the smoothness of each exchange. Your items are returned to you now, officially yours to take home. You gather them, carefully aware of their value in a way that goes beyond cost. Each one represents not just a purchase, but a decision made within limits. As you step aside, making room for the next person, you take a moment to observe the space once more. The shelves, the line, the steady movement of people adjusting to what is available rather than seeking what is not. There is something steadying in that adjustment. You move toward the exit, your steps unhurried, your bag held securely at your side. As you push the door open, the outside air greets you again, warmer now, carrying the sounds of the street that has continued in your absence. The line remains behind you, still forming, still shifting. You step away from it, rejoining the flow of the day. As you walk, you notice how the experience lingers, not as a burden, but as a quiet awareness. That time is not always yours to shape freely. That choice is often guided by what is present rather than what is desired. And yet within that structure there is still movement, still continuity, still a sense that the day, though shaped by the limits, continues forward with a steady, unbroken pace. You adjust your grip on the bag, feeling its weight modest but meaningful. Then you continue on, carried once more by the rhythm that connects each part of this day from the dim quiet of morning to the careful exchanges that now follow. You continue along the street, your bag resting lightly against your side, its content shifting with each step. The movement feels steady now, familiar in a way that no longer asks for your full attention. Instead, your awareness begins to widen again, taking in the world around you with a quieter kind of curiosity. Main Street stretches ahead, not grand but central. It holds the town together in ways that are not always obvious until you move through it like this. Storefronts line both sides, their windows arranged with care, each display offering a version of normal life that feels just slightly adjusted. You slow your pace. There is no need to hurry. The day has reached that point where movement becomes less about urgency and more about continuation. People pass you in both directions, each carrying something. A parcel, a newspaper, a look that suggests they are thinking about something beyond what is immediately visible. A widely observed feature of wartime America is the strong presence of public messaging with posters, signs and displays encouraging citizens to support the war effort through conservation, production and vigilance. These messages appeared in shop windows, on street corners and inside public buildings, shaping not just behavior but the atmosphere itself. You can see that influence here in the images that fill the glass in front of you. One window shows a neatly arranged display of canned goods, each label facing outward, accompanied by a small sign reminding passers-by to buy only what they need. Another features a poster with bold lettering, its message direct, its tone firm but not unkind. The colours are slightly faded by the sun, yet the intent remains clear. You pause briefly, your eyes moving from one display to the next. There is something performative in it, not in a theatrical sense, but in the way each element seems to present a version of how life should look, how it should be understood. It is not false, but it is curated, shaped to reinforce a certain way of thinking. A quiet, often overlooked observation is that local businesses adapted their presentation styles during this time, balancing the need to attract customers with the expectation of restraint. Excess was discouraged, yet visibility remained important. You can sense that balance here in the careful spacing of items, in the absence of anything that might appear unnecessary. You continue walking, your steps light, your attention shifting from windows to people and back again. A group gathers near a corner, their voices low, their conversation unfolding in fragments that drift just within reach of your hearing. You catch a mention of a shipment, a brief comment about timing, then a pause that suggests the topic has shifted. Further along, a small cafe sits with its door open, the interior visible from the street. A few people are seated inside, their movements slower, their expressions softened by the relative calm of the space. You consider stepping in, then continue past your path already set by the flow you've been following all day. There is a curious note from personal accounts of the era that some towns maintained a sense of routine social life despite the pressures of war, with people continuing to gather in familiar places, though often with a more subdued tone. These moments of normalcy did not erase the larger context, but they provided a kind of balance, a way to hold on to something recognizable. You reach a small intersection and pause as others cross. A vehicle passes its motion steady, its presence less frequent than you might expect. You watch it move away, then continue on as the space clears. The soundscape here is layered in a way that feels both full and restrained. Footsteps on pavement, a distant door closing, the faint hum of activity that never quite rises into noise. It all blends into something that feels continuous without sharp edges. Some scholars continue to explore how communities managed the emotional weight of constant wartime awareness, noting that public spaces often became places where that weight was shared, diffused through routine interaction rather than direct discussion. From where you stand, that idea feels present not in anything that is said outright, but in the way people move, the way they occupy the same space without needing to explain why. You pass a small bulletin board near the edge of the street, its surface covered with notices pinned in careful rows. Some are official, others appear more personal. Announcements, requests, updates that speak to the ongoing adjustments of daily life. You stop for a moment scanning the board. The details are brief, each one offering just enough information to be understood, but not enough to linger. It reflects the pace of the time, where information moves quickly and attention must be divided among many things. A gentle breeze moves through the street, lifting the edges of the papers slightly, creating a soft rustle that adds to the layered sound around you. It feels like a small interruption, though it changes nothing. You step back and continue walking. The sun has risen higher now, casting clearer light across the buildings, sharpening the outlines that earlier felt softened. Shadows shorten, pulling closer to the objects that create them. The day is settling into its middle hours. You notice how your bag feels lighter now, not because its contents have changed, but because your body has adjusted to carrying it. The same is true of everything else. The sounds, the movements, the expectations, they have become part of the background, allowing your mind to drift slightly, to observe rather than react. There is a quiet continuity in all of this. The street does not demand attention. It offers it in small, steady ways. You move through it neither separate from it nor fully absorbed by it, existing somewhere in between where awareness and routine meet. And as you continue along Main Street, passing one window, one doorway, one quiet exchange after another, you begin to understand that this space, like so many others today, is shaped not by any single moment, but by the accumulation of many small ones. Each step, each glance, each quiet adjustment, together they form the texture of a day that continues to unfold steady and unbroken, carrying you forward into whatever comes next. The street gradually thins behind you, and without quite deciding to you, find yourself drawn toward a quieter place again. Not silent, but contained. A doorway stands open ahead, and from within a soft, steady sound reaches out to meet you. It is not mechanical, not like the factory, but patterned in its own way. You step inside. The room is dimmer than the street, though not as dark as your house was this morning. The light here is intentional, directed towards certain spaces and allowed to fade in others. Chairs are arranged in small clusters, some occupied, others waiting. A few people sit already, their postures relaxed, their attention focused on a single object placed near the center. A radio. Its presence feels almost central to the room, not physically large, but important in a way that shapes everything around it. The voice coming from it is calm, measured, carrying information that feels both distant and immediate at the same time. You take a seat. The wood beneath you is smooth, slightly worn familiar, in a way that suggests many others have sat here before, listening to the same steady stream of words. The voice continues speaking of places far beyond this room, names of cities, movements of ships, outcomes that are described carefully, as if each word has been chosen with care. A widely accepted element of wartime life was the central role of radio broadcasts in delivering news to the American public. Families and communities often gathered to listen to updates, relying on these broadcasts as one of their primary connections to events unfolding overseas. You can feel that connection here, not just in the information itself, but in the way people sit attentive without being rigid. No one interrupts. No one asks questions. The information arrives and it's received. You listen though. Your attention moves between the voice and the room itself. A person near the window leans slightly forward, their hands folded together, their eyes fixed not on the radio but somewhere just beyond it. Another sits back, their posture looser, yet their stillness suggests they are no less engaged. There is a quiet detail often mentioned in personal recollections that some people develop strong preferences for certain radio announcers, finding comfort in familiar voices during uncertain times. The tone, the cadence, even the pauses became part of the experience, shaping how the news was felt as much as how it was understood. You begin to notice that here the particular rhythm of the voice, the way it rises and falls without urgency. A brief pause in the broadcast allows a soft shift in the room. Someone adjusts their seat and another exhales more fully than before, as if releasing something that had been held in place. Then the voice returns. You catch fragments now, a report of movement, a mention of progress, a careful acknowledgement of loss delivered in a tone that neither lingers nor rushes past it. The balance is precise. Some historians continue to explore how wartime information was shaped by the need to maintain morale, suggesting that not all details were presented equally or immediately. Yet even within those limits, the broadcast carried enough weight to influence how people imagined the world beyond their immediate surroundings. You can sense that influence now in the way the room absorbs each word. You shift slightly in your seat, your hands resting loosely in your lap. The air here feels still not stagnant, but settled. It holds the sound in a way that prevents it from dispersing too quickly, allowing each phrase to linger just a moment longer than it might elsewhere. Outside, the day continues. But inside door, time feels different. Not slower exactly, more focused. A small clock on the wall marks the passing minutes, though no one seems to be watching it closely. The rhythm of the broadcast provides its own measure, dividing the day into segments of attention rather than hours. You notice a newspaper resting on a nearby table, its pages folded, its headlines already familiar to those who have read it. The printed word and the spoken word exist side by side, each offering a version of the same reality, each shaped by its own constraints. There is a subtle contrast between them. The newspaper feels fixed, its words set in place, unchanging once printed. The radio, by contrast, feels fluid, its message unfolding in real time, even if carefully prepared. You glance towards the door where light from outside forms a soft outline on the floor. A few people pass by, their movement visible only for a moment before they continue on. The world beyond this room remains active even as this space holds its quiet focus. A less commonly discussed observation is that some listeners developed personal rituals around these broadcasts, choosing specific times to listen, often aligning them with daily routines. The act of listening became part of the structure of the day, not separate from it. You can feel that sense of routine here, the way people have gathered, without needing to coordinate, each arriving at roughly the same moment. The broadcast begins to wind down the voice, shifting slightly in tone, signalling an ending without announcing it directly. The final words are delivered with the same calm precision as the rest. Then the sound fades into a softer, more neutral tone. For a moment, no one moves. The silence that follows is not empty. It holds the echo of what has just been heard. Then gradually people begin to rise. Chairs shift. Steps move toward the door. Conversations begin, but quietly, as if the room still carries something that should not be disturbed too quickly. You stand as well, your body adjusting to the change. The transition feels gentle, though it carries a weight that is difficult to name. As you step back outside, the brightness of the day meets you again, more pronounced now after the dim interior. The street is still in motion, still carrying its steady flow, though you now feel slightly altered within it. The information you have just received does not sit heavily, yet it does not disappear either. It becomes part of the background, part of the understanding you carry as you move forward. You take a few steps, your pace unhurried, your thoughts settling into the same quiet rhythm that has guided you through the day so far. The war remains distant, and yet through voices like the one you just heard, it has found a way to feel close. Not overwhelming, not immediate, but present. Always present. And as you continue walking, rejoining the steady movement of the street, you carry that presence with you, folded gently into the ongoing pattern of your day. You step away from the doorway and let the brightness of the afternoon settle fully around you again. The sound of the broadcast lingers for a moment, then fades into the wider texture of the street. Your path draws you onward, though not toward anything loud or urgent. Instead, it leads you into something quieter, something more contained. You reach your home again. The door closes behind you with a soft, familiar click, and the outside world narrows into the rooms you now move through. The light here has shifted since the morning. It no longer presses faintly against the curtains, but filters through in a way that suggests the day has matured. Still, the blackout fabric remains in place, holding back more than it allows in. You set your bag down on the table, the contents resting where they will be needed later. For now, your attention moves elsewhere, drawn by a small object placed near the center of the room. Letters. They sit in a neat stack, their edges aligned, their surfaces marked with careful handwriting. Some are already opened, their folds softened by repeated handling. Others remain sealed, waiting. You approach slowly, your fingers hovering just above the top envelope before finally making contact. The paper feels thin, almost delicate, yet it carries a weight that is far greater than its size suggests. A commonly acknowledged feature of wartime life was the central role of personal correspondence, with letters serving as one of the primary ways families maintained connection with loved ones serving overseas. These messages often travelled long distances, delayed by conditions beyond anyone's control, making their arrival both unpredictable and deeply meaningful. You can feel that meaning here in the way the letters have been kept, handled, preserved. You lift one carefully, turning it over in your hands. The handwriting is familiar, though slightly altered, as if shaped by a different environment. The ink has settled into the paper, unevenly darker in some places, lighter in others. You sit the chair supporting you as you begin to unfold the page. The sound of the paper is soft, almost fragile as it opens. You take a moment before reading, allowing yourself to simply hold it to feel the connection it represents. Then you begin. The words are simple. Direct. They speak of daily routines, of small observations, of moments that might seem insignificant outside of this context, yet here they carry a kind of quiet intensity. Each sentence feels considered, as though shaped not just by what is written, but by what cannot be said. There is a lesser-known detail that many letters sent during this time were subject to censorship, with certain information restricted to protect military operations. Writers often learn to express themselves within these limits, focusing on personal details rather than specifics of location or action. You can sense that here in the careful way the words are chosen in the spaces between them. You read slowly, your eyes moving across the lines, your mind filling in the rest. A mention of weather, a brief note about food, a line that hints at fatigue, though it does not state it directly. You pause. The room feels quieter now. Not empty, but focused, as though everything has drawn closer to this single moment. You continue reading, your attention steady, your breathing even. The outside world remained thin, but it has shifted to the background, its presence softened by the immediacy of what you hold in your hands. Some historians continue to examine how these letters shaped emotional life on the home front, suggesting that they provided both comfort and anxiety depending on what was said and what was left unsaid. From where you sit, that dual nature feels clear. The connection is real, yet it carries with it an awareness of distance that cannot be closed. You reach the end of the page. The final line is brief. It offers reassurance, though you can sense the effort behind it. You fold the letter carefully, following the same lines it held before, as if preserving its original shape matters. You place it back on the table, aligning it with the others. For a moment you do nothing. You sit. You listen to the quiet. The house holds you again, its walls containing not just space, but the weight of these small exchanges that stretch across oceans. Your hand rests lightly on the table, your fingers tracing the edge of the paper without quite touching it again. The texture remains in your memory, even as you pull your hand away. Say, there is another envelope. You notice it now still sealed. You hesitate, not because you do not want to open it, but because you understand that once you do, something will change. The unknown will become known, and with that knowledge will come whatever it carries. A quiet observation from personal accounts of the time. is that some people delayed opening letters, choosing to hold on to the moment before knowing, extending it for as long as possible. It was not avoidance, but a way of managing anticipation. You can feel that instinct here in the way your hand pauses just above the envelope. Eventually you take it. The paper feels the same yet different. You open it slowly, your movements careful, deliberate. The sound is soft, almost hesitant as the seal gives way. You unfold the page. The words inside meet you in the same measured way as before, though their tone carries its own subtle differences. Each letter holds its own rhythm, shaped by the person who wrote it, by the moment in which it was written. You read. The room remains still. Time seems to settle around you, not stopping, but easing into a slower pace. When you finish, you place this letter alongside the others, your movements mirroring what you have already done. The stack grows slightly, though the change is small. You lean back, your body resting into the chair. The light in the room has shifted again, softer now, suggesting that the day is beginning to move toward its later hours. The edges of objects blur slightly as shadows lengthen. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to hold the feeling of connection that lingers after reading. The voices from the letters remain quiet but present. They do not demand attention. They stay with you. And as you sit there in the dimming light of a home shaped by distance and routine, you understand that these small pieces of paper carry something far larger than themselves. They carry presence. They carry absence. They carry the steady thread that connects this quiet room to a world far beyond it. You open your eyes again. The day continues, and you rise slowly, carrying that thread with you into whatever comes next. You rise from the chair, though the feeling of the letters does not leave you. It stays close, not heavy, but persistent, like a quiet presence that follows rather than leads. The house feels slightly different now. Not changed in any visible way, but altered by what you have just read. You move through the room slowly, your steps soft against the floor. The air carries a stillness that feels deeper than before, as if the walls themselves have settled into a quieter awareness. The sounds you noticed this morning have returned, but they feel more distant now. A pipe shifts somewhere out of sight. A faint creak moves through the structure of the house. You pause near the window, though the curtain still blocks most of the view. A thin line of light slips through at the edge, enough to remind you that the world outside continues, even if you cannot see it clearly from here. The house is not empty, and yet it feels that way. A widely recognized aspect of life on the Homefront was the emotional strain created by separation as families adjusted to the absence of those who had left for military service or war-related work. Homes that were once filled with familiar voices often became quieter, their routines reshaped around what was no longer present. You can feel that absence here, not in anything that is missing physically, but in the spaces that remain unfilled. You walk into another room, your hand brushing lightly against the frame of the doorway as you pass. The objects inside are arranged with care. A chair positioned just so. A book resting on a table, its pages marked but not currently read. Everything suggests use, yet nothing is in motion. You sit again, though, not for any particular reason. The act of sitting feels like a way to remain within the moment, to avoid moving too quickly into whatever comes next. There is a quiet detail often mentioned in personal reflections from this time that many people learn to carry on with daily routines while holding a constant undercurrent of worry. It was not always visible, it did not always interrupt the surface of the day, but it was there, woven into the background of thought, shaping how moments were experienced. You can sense that now. Not as a sharp feeling, but as something softer, more diffuse. It settles in the spaces between actions, in the pauses that stretch slightly longer than they used to. You look up around the room, again, your eyes moving from one object to another. Each one feels familiar, yet slightly distant, as if you're seeing it from a new angle. The table, the chair, the small details that make up the space. None of them have changed, and yet your relationship to them has. Some historians continue to examine how prolonged uncertainty affected emotional resilience during the war, with differing interpretations about how individuals coped over time. Some suggest that routines provided stability, while others point to the quiet accumulation of stress beneath those routines. From where you sit, both seem possible, existing together without contradiction. You lean back slightly, allowing your body to rest more fully. The chair supports you in a way that feels steady grounding. You close your eyes for a moment, not to escape but to listen. The house breathes around you. The subtle shifts in sound create a kind of rhythm, one that is slower, less structured than the factory, yet no less present. It is a rhythm of stillness, of waiting, of continuation without clear direction. You open your eyes, again your gaze settling on a small object near the edge of the table. It is something simple, perhaps a photograph or a personal item, something that holds meaning beyond its appearance. You do not reach for it. You simply observe it, allowing the association to remain unspoken. There is a quiet observation from this period that many people develop small personal rituals to manage the emotional distance created by the war. These rituals were not always obvious. They might involve revisiting certain objects, repeating certain actions, or simply sitting with a thought for a little longer than usual. You can feel the presence of such a ritual here even if you do not name it directly. Time moves slowly. You are aware of it, though you do not measure it precisely. The light in the room shifts again, growing softer, the edges of objects becoming less defined as the day begins to move toward evening. You stand once more this time, with a clearer sense of movement. The stillness has not disappeared, but it has settled into something you can carry rather than something that holds you in play. You walk back toward the main room, your steps steady, your breathing even. The house remains quiet, but it no longer feels empty in the same way. It feels held contained, as though it has adjusted along with you. You pass the table where the letters rest your gaze, lingering there for a moment before moving on. They remain where you left them unchanged, yet their presence continues to shape the space around them. The day has not stopped. It has simply shifted, and you move with it. As you reach the doorway once more, preparing to step back into the world beyond the house, you carry with you the quiet understanding that absence is not always defined by what is missing. Sometimes it is defined by what remains. The space, the silence, the continuation of small, steady actions in a world that feels both close and far away at the same time. You open the door. The light meets you again, and without hesitation you step forward, rejoining the flow of the day that has been waiting just beyond the threshold. You step back outside, and the air carries a slightly heavier warmth now, as if the day has settled into itself. The light is fuller, less tentative, stretching across the street with a clarity that leaves little hidden. Your steps fall into place again, guided by the same quiet momentum that has carried you from one part of the day to another. But something shifts as you move, not in the street itself, but in the way people gather within it. You begin to notice patterns that were less visible before. Groups that seem to cluster more tightly, spaces where conversation feels more charged even if voices remain low. The flow is still there, but it is not entirely smooth. There are subtle interruptions, small pauses that suggest something beneath the surface. You pass a building where a line has formed again, though this one feels different from the one at the store. The spacing is closer. The expressions more focused. A sign is posted near the entrance, its message direct, its tone firm. A widely documented reality of wartime America is that industrial expansion created new job opportunities, particularly in the defense industries, drawing large numbers of workers into cities and reshaping local communities. However, access to these opportunities was not equal, and existing racial divisions often limited who could participate fully in this economic shift. You can sense that imbalance here, not as a distant concept, but as something present in the way people stand, the way they wait. You slow slightly as you pass, your attention drawn to the quiet tension in the line. No one speaks loudly, yet the silence feels different from the patience you experienced earlier. It carries an edge, a sense of something unresolved. Further along, you notice a group gathered near a corner, their conversation more animated than others you have encountered today. Their gestures are sharper, their expressions more defined. You do not hear every word, but you catch enough to understand that the topic is not routine. A smaller, often overlooked detail is that the wartime migration brought people from different regions into close proximity, sometimes creating friction as communities adjusted to rapid change. Housing shortages, job competition, and long-standing prejudices all played a role in shaping these interactions. You can see traces of that adjustment here in the way people negotiate space and the way certain groups cluster together while others remain apart. You continue walking your pace steady, though your awareness has sharpened. The street feels the same, yet not entirely. The details you noticed earlier now carry additional meaning layered with something more complex. You pass a row of houses where the porches hold small groups of people sitting close together. Their conversations quiet but continuous. There is a sense of familiarity in these gatherings, a shared understanding that does not need to be explained. Yet even here you notice how the groups are formed, how certain lines remain even in spaces meant for rest. A question that continues to be explored by scholars is how much the wartime push for unity truly bridged these divisions, and how much it simply overlaid them with a temporary sense of common purpose. From where you stand, the answer does not feel simple. The signs of connection are present, but so are the signs of separation. You move toward a bus stop where a small crowd has gathered. The vehicle arrives, its doors opening with a familiar sound, and people begin to board. You follow, stepping inside and finding a place to stand once more. The interior feels similar to the streetcar from earlier, though the atmosphere carries a slightly different tone. Conversations here are more subdued, more contained. People avoid direct eye contact, and their attention focused on small personal spaces. You notice how seats are occupied, not randomly. There is a pattern, subtle but clear, once you see it. It is not enforced by the visible signs, yet it holds. You find yourself adjusting your position within it, not because anyone tells you to, but because the structure is already in place. A factual point often highlighted in discussions of this period is that segregation remained a defining feature of American society during World War II, shaping access to public spaces, employment and services. Even as the war called for unity, these divisions persisted, influencing daily life in ways both visible and unspoken. You can feel that reality here in the arrangement of bodies within a shared space. The bus moves forward, carrying everyone along the same route yet not entirely together. You hold onto the rail, your hand steady, your gaze drifting toward the window. Outside, the street continues its movement uninterrupted, its rhythm steady. Inside, the atmosphere remains contained. A conversation begins nearby, quiet but intense. You catch a few words enough to understand that it touches on work, on opportunity, on something that feels both immediate and ongoing. The voices are controlled, but there is an undercurrent that suggests more beneath the surface. You do not turn to look. You remain where you are, your attention divided between what you hear and what you sense. A lesser discussed observation is that many individuals navigated these tensions in subtle ways, choosing when to speak, when to remain silent, when to adjust, and when to hold their ground. These choices were often made moment by moment, shaped by circumstance rather than clear rules. You can sense that navigation here in the way people position themselves, in the way conversations begin and end. And the bus slows, then stops. A few people step off. Others take their place. The pattern continues. You feel the motion beneath your feet, the steady forward movement that does not pause for any single experience. The world outside remains consistent even as the layers within it shift. Eventually your stop arrives. You step down the ground firm beneath you once more, the air meeting you with a sense of openness that contrasts with the enclosed space you have just left. You take a breath. The street here feels quieter again, though the awareness you carry has changed the way you see it. The details are sharper, the patterns more visible. You begin to walk your steps steady, your mind holding what you've observed without needing to resolve it. The day continues, not smooth, not broken, but layered. And as you move forward, you understand that this is part of the reality as well. Not just the routines, the work, the waiting, but the tensions that move alongside them, shaping the spaces between people in ways that are not always spoken. You carry that understanding with you, quietly, as the street opens ahead once more, and the rhythm of the day draws you onward. You continue forward, and after a while, the tension you noticed begins to soften at the edges. It does not disappear, but it loosens, giving way to something lighter that seems to gather as the afternoon leans toward evening. The light shifts again, warmer now, settling across the street in a way that feels almost inviting. Your steps carry you past a familiar corner, and this time you slow drawn toward the small cafe you passed earlier. The door remains open, and from inside comes a different kind of sound than anything you have heard so far today. It is not mechanical, not structured by work or announcements, but something looser. Music. You step inside. The air feels warmer here, carrying the scent of coffee-baked goods and something faintly sweet that lingers near the edges of the room. The light is softer, filtered through the windows in a way that blurs the sharper outlines of the day. A few tables are occupied, each holding small groups of people leaning slightly toward one another, their conversations quiet but animated. You take a seat near the edge of the room, your body settling into the chair with a sense of ease that feels different from the earlier pauses in your day. This is not a break defined by necessity, it feels chosen. A widely recognized feature of wartime social life is that people continue to seek moments of recreation and connection, even as the larger world remained uncertain. Dance halls, cinemas, and cafes provided spaces where individuals could step briefly outside the demands of work and worry. You can feel that purpose here in the way the room holds a different kind of energy. The music plays softly, not loud enough to dominate, but present enough to shape the atmosphere. It moves through the space with a steady rhythm, its melody familiar without being distracting. You notice how it changes the way people sit, the way they speak, the way they hold themselves. A person at the next table leans in slightly, their voice low, their expression softened by the moment. Across from them, someone listens with a small smile, their posture relaxed in a way that suggests they have allowed themselves, at least for now, to set aside other concerns. There is a lesser-known observation that during the war years, popular music often carried themes of longing, separation, and hope, reflecting the emotional landscape of those listening. Songs became a way to process feelings that were not always easy to express directly. You can sense that here in the tone of the melody, in the way it seems to resonate with the quiet conversations around you. You rest your hands on the table, feeling the smooth surface beneath your fingers. The cup placed in front of you releases a gentle warmth, its contents modest but comforting. You lift it, taking a slow sip, allowing the taste to settle. It's not rich, but it is enough. The room continues to fill gradually, not crowded, but fuller than before. Each new arrival adds a slight shift to the atmosphere, a new voice, a new presence that blends into the existing rhythm. You notice a small space near the back where a few people have gathered. More closely, their attention focused on one another rather than the room at large. There is laughter there, quiet but genuine, breaking through the softer tones that dominate elsewhere. A point often discussed by researchers is how moments of leisure during wartime served not just as distraction, but as necessary emotional balance, allowing people to maintain a sense of normalcy. From where you sit, that balance feels tangible, not in any single action, but in the way the room holds both awareness and release at the same time. You glance toward the window where the light has shifted again now, casting longer shapes across the floor. The day is moving steadily toward evening, though it does not feel abrupt. It unfolds gently, allowing each moment to settle before the next begins. The music changes, the melody shifting into something slightly slower. The effect is subtle but noticeable. Conversations adjust, voices lowering just a bit, movements becoming more measured. A curious detail from personal recollections is that some people formed brief but meaningful connections in places like this, knowing that circumstances might not allow those connections to last. These interactions were often shaped by the awareness of time, by the understanding that moments could not always be extended. You can sense that awareness here in the way people engage with one another, present without holding too tightly. You sit quietly, your attention moving between the music, the conversations, and your own thoughts, which now feel less crowded than they did earlier. The weight you carried from the factory, from the lines, from the letters, has not vanished, but it has shifted, softened at the edges. For a while you do nothing, you simply remain. The room holds you in a way that feels both temporary and complete. Eventually you set your cup down, the sound soft against the table. You look around once more, taking in the details. The way the light touches the edges of objects, the way voices blend into a steady murmur, the way the music continues without interruption. Then you rise. Your body responds easily as though it has been given just enough rest to move forward again. You step toward the door, pausing briefly at the threshold. Outside, the evening is beginning to take shape. The air feels cooler, the light dimmer, the street quieter than before, though not still. The day has not ended. It has simply changed its pace. You step out, leaving behind the warmth, the music, the small moments of shared presence. They remain inside, and yet they follow you in a quieter way, carried in the slight ease of your movement, in the steadiness of your breath. As you walk, you understand that these moments, brief as they are, hold their own kind of importance. Not separate from the rest of the day, but woven into it, offering a different texture, a different way of continuing. The street stretches ahead. The light fades slowly, and you move forward once more, guided by the same quiet rhythm that has carried you through each part of this day. You step back onto the street, and the air feels cooler, now touched by the slow arrival of evening. The light has softened, settling into a quieter tone that wraps itself around buildings, trees, and passing figures. The pace of movement shifts again, not stopping, but easing into something less driven, more reflective. Your steps carry you toward a place where people have begun to gather in a different way. The station, it does not announce itself loudly. It simply exists at the edge of the street, marked by a low structure, a platform, and the faint vibration of something approaching from a distance. You feel it before you hear it fully, a subtle tremor beneath your feet, a signal that something is on its way. People stand in small groups, their arrangements less fluid than those you have seen throughout the day. There is a stillness here that feels more deliberate, as though each person has chosen their position carefully and intends to remain there. You move closer, your pace is slowing naturally. A clearly established aspect of wartime life was the movement of soldiers through transportation hubs as men travelled between training camps, deployment points, and brief returns home. Train stations became places where arrivals and departures carried emotional weight far beyond the act of travel itself. You can sense that weight here in the way people wait. Some stand close together, their shoulders nearly touching. Others maintain a small distance, as if preparing themselves for what is about to happen. Conversations are quiet, often unfinished, as though words are being held back rather than spoken. The sound grows stronger. The train approaches. It does not rush in. It arrives with a steady presence, its motion controlled, its size gradually filling the space. The metal glints in the fading light, and the sound of its wheels settles into a low, continuous rhythm as it slows. You watch as it comes to a stop. The doors open, and everything shifts. Movement replaces stillness, but not in a chaotic way. It unfolds in layers. People step forward, some with purpose, others with hesitation. Figures emerge from the train, their forms outlined by the interior light before they step down onto the platform. You notice the uniforms first. Not all, but enough to mark a clear difference. The fabric, the posture, the way they carry themselves. It is not dramatic, it is simply distinct. A smaller, often overlooked detail is that brief periods of leave, known as furloughs, allowed service members to return home for short visits, creating moments of reunion that were both joyful and fleeting. These visits were often carefully timed, shaped by schedules that did not allow for extension. You can see that tension here in the way people move toward one another. A woman steps forward, her pace quickening as she recognizes someone stepping off the train. The distance between them closes quickly, though not abruptly. There is a moment just before they reach each other, where everything seems to pause. Then they meet. The embrace is firm but not exaggerated. It holds for a moment, then eases, though the connection remains in the way they stand close, in the way they look at one another, as if confirming something that has been uncertain. Nearby, another reunion unfolds more quietly. A nod, a brief touch of hands, a few words exchanged that are too soft to hear, yet clearly understood by those speaking them. You stand slightly apart, your position allowing you to observe without being part of any single exchange. The scene unfolds around you, each interaction carrying its own rhythm, its own weight. Some historians continue to explore how these brief reunions influenced family dynamics, noting that the return of a loved one even for a short time could shift roles and expectations in ways that were not always easy to navigate. From where you stand, you can see hints of that complexity in the way people move together, in the slight adjustments that occur as they reconnect. Not all moments are reunions, some are departures. You notice a group standing near the far end of the platform, their posture more contained, their movement slower. A young man stands among them, his expression steady, though there is a tightness in the way he holds himself. A bag rests at his feet, its presence clear, its purpose understood. The conversation around him is quiet, measured. There is no rush, though time feels limited. A curious observation from personal accounts is that goodbyes were often shaped by an awareness of uncertainty, with people choosing their words, carefully balancing reassurance with honesty. These moments did not always unfold with visible emotion. Sometimes they were marked by restraint, by a decision to hold certain feelings just beneath the surface. You watch as the group shifts slightly, the arrangement changing as the moment approaches. A hand rests briefly on a shoulder. A glance is exchanged that carries more meaning than any spoken sentence. The call to board comes. It is not loud, but it is enough. The young man reaches for his bag, lifting it with a motion that feels both practiced and final. He turns back once more, his gaze moving across the faces in front of him. There is no dramatic pause, just a moment. Then he steps forward. The distance opens. He boards the train. The door closes. The sound begins again, the low rhythm of movement returning as the train prepares to depart. You remain where you are, your attention fixed on the way the scene settles after the motion has passed. Those left behind do not move immediately. They stand for a moment longer, as if allowing the experience to complete itself. Then slowly they begin to turn away. The platform clears. The train moves. Its presence fades into the distance, the sound diminishing until it becomes part of the larger quiet of the evening. You take a breath. The air feels cooler now. The light has shifted further, the edges of the day softening as night approaches. You step back from the platform, your path turning once more toward the street. The movement feels natural, though it carries with it the weight of what you have just witnessed. Reunions, departures, moments that begin and end within the same space. You walk on your pace, steady, your thoughts quieter now. The day continues, not with the same intensity, but with the same quiet persistence. And as you move forward, you carry with you the understanding that even these brief encounters, these small intersections of whys, hold a depth that does not need to be spoken to be felt. They remain, in the spaces between, in the rhythm that carries you onward into the evening. You leave the station behind, though. Its echoes remain with you for a while. The platform, the embraces, the quiet departures all settle into the background of your thoughts as your steps carry you farther into the evening. The street feels calmer now, as if the day has exhaled and allowed itself to slow. The sky deepens gradually, not yet dark, but no longer bright. A softer tone spreads overhead, and the first hints of evening settle across rooftops and sidewalks. You notice how people begin to change their pace again, not rushing home, but drifting toward it with a kind of gentle certainty. Your path leads you through a neighborhood that feels more residential, more enclosed. The buildings sit closer together, their windows glowing faintly as lights begin to turn on inside. Curtains are drawn not only for comfort, but for something more deliberate. You notice it again, the careful management of light. A well-known practice during the war was the use of blackout precautions, especially in coastal areas where reducing visible light at night was considered an important safety measure. Even in places far from direct danger, many communities adopted these habits, treating them as part of their civic responsibility. You can see that here in the way windows are covered, in the way light is allowed to exist only within certain limits. You slow as you pass a house where the front window glows softly behind a thick curtain. The light does not spill outward. It remains contained, held within the boundaries of the home. From inside you can hear the faint murmur of voices, steady and low, blending with the occasional sound of movement. Further along, a small group gathers near a corner, their attention directed upward. You follow their gaze. The sky. It stretches above you, open and quiet, its colour shifting toward deeper shades as the last of the daylight fades. There is nothing unusual to see, and yet the act of looking feels purposeful, as if watching the sky has become part of the routine. A lesser-known aspect of civil defence efforts is that communities often held air raid drills preparing citizens for the possibility of attack. These drills involve turning off lights, taking shelter, and practicing coordinated responses even in places where the likelihood of danger was low. You can sense that preparedness here in the way people observe their surroundings, in the way they remain aware of what is above as well as what is around them. The group disperses slowly, their attention returning to the street, their movements calm but deliberate. No one speaks loudly. The quiet of the evening feels shared, as though it belongs to everyone at once. You continue walking your steps, measured, your breathing even. The sounds of the day have softened now. The distant hum of activity has faded, replaced by smaller, more contained noises, a door closing gently, the faint clink of dishes from inside a home, the rustle of leaves as a light breeze moves through. You pass a lamp-post, its light dimmed more than you might expect. It casts a narrow circle on the ground, just enough to guide your steps without drawing attention. The effect is subtle but noticeable. The street feels darker, though not unwelcoming. Some historians continue to discuss how much these precautions affected daily life psychologically, suggesting that even when the threat was distant, the act of preparing for it created a constant sense of vigilance. From where you walk, that vigilance feels present, though it does not overwhelm. It sits quietly beneath the surface, shaping behavior without dominating it. You reach a small open space where a few people have gathered, their movements slower, now their voices softer. A child stands near the edge looking upward, again their expression curious rather than concerned. An adult places a gentle hand on their shoulder, guiding them back toward the house. There is something tender in that gesture, a quiet reassurance that does not need to be spoken. You pause for a moment, allowing yourself to take in the scene. The dimmed lights, the careful movements, the shared awareness that something larger exists beyond what can be seen. Then you move on. Your path curves gently, leading you back toward your own home. The familiarity of the route settles into you, each step guided by memory rather than thought. The houses become more recognizable, their shapes aligning with what you know. When you reach your door, you pause briefly before entering, your hand resting on the handle. The outside world remains just beyond its quiet presence, stretching across the neighborhood. You step inside, the door closes behind you. The interior feels warmer, the light softer, contained within the walls. The blackout curtains hold their place, keeping the glow from reaching outward. The house feels secure and closed, separate from the wider darkness. You move through the rooms, your steps slower, now your body responding to the shift in pace. The day has carried you through many spaces, each with its own rhythm. Now those rhythms begin to settle into something more unified. You sit for a moment, your hands resting loosely, your attention drifting. The house holds you again. The outside fades, the quiet deepens, and as the evening continues to unfold, you begin to understand how these small acts, dimming, a light closing, a curtain pausing to look at the sky, all become part of a larger pattern. Not dramatic. Not urgent, but steady. A way of living within uncertainty without letting it take over completely. You breathe slowly, allowing the stillness to settle. The day is not over, but it is changing, and you're moving with it gently into whatever comes next. You remain inside, and for a while the house holds a quiet that feels almost complete. The dimmed light rests gently against the walls, never reaching too far, never demanding attention. Outside, the neighborhood has settled into its evening rhythm, though traces of movement still pass now and then, soft and distant. You sit with that stillness, letting it shape the way you breathe, the way you think, the way you simply exist within the space. After some time, you rise again, drawn not by urgency, but by a subtle pull toward something shared. You move towards a nearby building, one that has been part of the neighborhood for years, its purpose steady even as the world around it shifts. A church. The door is open. You step inside. The air is cooler here, carrying a faint scent of wood fabric and something older, something that has settled into the space over many years. The light is soft, filtered through high windows falling in quiet patterns across the floor. People are already gathered, though not in large numbers. They sit scattered across the room, leaving space between one another, their postures calm, their attention inward as much as outward. You take a seat. The bench beneath you is firm, familiar, its surface worn smooth by time and use. You rest your hands lightly in your lap, your body adjusting to the stillness that fills the room. A commonly noted aspect of wartime life is that many people turn to religious or spiritual practices as a way of managing uncertainty, seeking comfort in routines that offered a sense of continuity and meaning. Churches, along with other places of gathering, became spaces where individuals could process what they could not control. You can feel that purpose here, not in any single action, but in the quiet way people sit, the way they breathe. A voice begins to speak. It is not loud. It does not need to be. The words carry gently through the space, measured steady, offering thoughts that are both specific and open, allowing each listener to take from them what they need. You listen, though your attention drifts at times, not out of disinterest, but because the environment itself encourages a softer kind of focus. There is a small, often overlooked detail that during this period some people developed personal habits or rituals that blended faith with everyday routines, such as carrying small objects, repeating certain phrases, or marking specific moments in quiet ways. These practices were not always formal, but they provided a sense of grounding. You notice this in the way a person near you holds their hands, fingers moving slightly, perhaps counting, perhaps remembering. The voice continues, then pauses. The silence that follows is not empty. It holds the room together, allowing each person to sit with their own thoughts without interruption. You find your own thoughts settling into a slower rhythm, less focused on any one thing, more aware of the overall feeling of being here in this shared quiet. Some scholars continue to consider how belief systems adapted during wartime, noting that while some found strengthened faith, others questioned long-held ideas. The experience was not uniform. It shifted from person to person, shaped by individual circumstances. From where you sit, those differences feel present though not visible. They exist beneath the surface, carried quietly within each person. A soft sound begins almost imperceptible at first. Music again, though different from what you heard earlier. It is slower, more restrained, its notes spaced in a way that allows each one to linger. The effect is calming, though it carries a depth that suggests more than simple comfort. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sound settle around you. The day begins to feel distant. Not gone, but softened. The moments you have moved through the factory, the lines, the letters, the station, all remain, yet they feel less immediate here, as though placed gently at a distance where they can be observed without pressing in too closely. You open your eyes again. The room remains unchanged, yet your awareness has shifted slightly. Your thoughts less defined, your attention more diffuse. After a while, the gathering begins to conclude. There is no clear signal. People simply begin to rise one by one, their movements quiet, their steps soft against the floor. You follow, standing slowly, allowing your body to adjust once more to movement after stillness. You move toward the door. Outside, night has deepened. The sky is darker now, though not entirely without light. A few faint points appear above, distant and steady. The air feels cooler, carrying a calm that is more complete than before. You step out, pausing for a moment just beyond the threshold. The building behind you holds its quiet. The street ahead stretches forward, dimly lit, its shape softened by the reduced light. You begin to walk. Your steps are slower now, not from fatigue alone, but from the way the day has unfolded, gradually easing you into this quieter pace. The sounds are minimal. The occasional footstep, the distant closing of a door, the faint rustle of something moving through the night air. A reflective point sometimes raised by researchers is how communities maintained a sense of cohesion through shared spaces like this. Even when individual experiences varied widely, these places allowed for connection without requiring explanation. You can feel that here in the way the evening holds you, along with others who are also moving quietly through it. You reach your home once more. The door opens. The familiar space welcomes you back. You step inside, closing it gently behind you. The light remains low. The house is still. And as you move through it, preparing for the final part of the day, you carry with you the calm that has settled not as an absence of everything else, but as a quiet layer resting above it. The world continues beyond these walls. But for now you're here, and that is enough. You move deeper into the house again, and the quiet now feels more settled than before, as if the day has gradually arranged itself into a softer shape. The light remains low, contained within the walls, never reaching outward. Outside, the night continues to deepen, though you sense it more than you see it. Your body carries the weight of the hours behind you, not sharply, but steadily. You step into the kitchen once more, the same space that greeted you in the early morning, though it feels different now. The surfaces are familiar, yet the energy has changed. The careful planning of breakfast has given way to something quieter, something shaped by the need to prepare for tomorrow. You move toward the table where a small collection of items has been placed. A piece of fabric, a needle, a spool of thread. The arrangement is simple yet deliberate. You sit. The chair supports you as it did before, though your body settles into it more deeply now. Your hands reach for the fabric, lifting it gently, feeling its texture between your fingers. It is worn, but still usable, still capable of being repaired. A widely recognized part of wartime domestic life was the emphasis on mending and conserving clothing, as materials were limited and new goods were not always easily available. Families often repaired garments, repeatedly extending their use for as long as possible. You can feel that principle here in the way the fabric has been kept, not discarded but maintained. You thread the needle. The motion is small, precise, requiring a level of attention that pulls you into the moment. The thread passes through with a slight resistance, then settles into place. You begin to sew your hands, moving slowly, guiding the needle in and out of the material. The rhythm is different from everything else you've done today. It is quiet, measured. Each stitch follows the last, not in haste, but with care. There is a lesser-known detail that some households organised evenings around tasks like this, combining mending, letter writing and small repairs into a kind of shared routine that filled the hours after work. These activities were not seen as separate from daily life, but as part of its continuation. You can imagine that here, even if you sit alone in this moment, the pattern remains. The fabric begins to change under your hands. The tear that once opened the surface starts to close the edges drawn together by the thread. This is a small transformation, yet it carries a quiet satisfaction. You pause briefly, adjusting your grip, then continue. The house remains still around you, its sounds reduced to the smallest movements. A faint shift in the walls, the soft brush of your own motion, the occasional distant noise from outside muted and indistinct. Some historians continue to examine how these domestic routines contributed to the broader war effort, suggesting that acts of conservation and repair played a meaningful role in sustaining resources. Others emphasize the psychological effect, noting that such tasks provided a sense of control in a time of uncertainty. From where you sit, both feel true. You continue sewing, your attention focused, your breathing steady. Time moves, though you do not measure it closely. The light shifts again, growing softer, the edges of the room blending into one another. As the evening deepens further, you notice it in the way the fabric appears slightly darker, in the way your hands move through shadow as much as light. You set the needle down for a moment, flexing your fingers, allowing them to rest. The sensation lingers, a gentle reminder of the work you have done. Nearby, a small stack of papers catches your eye. Forms perhaps, or notes that require attention. You reach for them, scanning the surface briefly. The details are practical. Numbers, names, instructions that guide what must be done next. A small, often overlooked aspect of wartime life is the increase in paperwork related to employment rationing and volunteer activities requiring individuals to manage information carefully in addition to physical tasks. You can see that here in the way the papers are arranged, in the need to review them even at the end of a long day. You set them back down. There will be time for that later. For now, you return to the fabric. The final stitches come together, closing the last of the opening. You tie the thread, securing it with a small firm motion, then trim the excess. The repair is complete. You hold the fabric up, examining it briefly. It is not perfect, but it is whole again. You place it carefully on the table, your hands resting beside it. The sense of completion is quiet. Not something that demands recognition, but something that settles gently into the space. The day has carried you through many forms of work. This is one of them. You lean back slightly, allowing your body to rest once more. The chair supports you, the house holds you. The night continues beyond the walls. There is no urgency now, only continuation. You remain there for a while, your thoughts drifting. Your attention moving between the objects around you and the feeling of stillness that has settled in. Eventually you rise. Your movements are slower now, your body responding to the accumulated weight of the day. You move through the house, adjusting small things, preparing for what comes next, without needing to think about it too deeply. The light is lowered further. The space grows softer. And as you make these final adjustments, you begin to feel the approach of rest, not as a sudden shift, but as a gradual easing into something quieter still. The day is not quite finished, but it is close, and you are ready to follow it there. You move through the last small motions of the evening, and the house responds by growing quieter still, as if it understands that the day is nearing its end. The light has been lowered to a soft glow, just enough to guide your steps without drawing your attention too sharply to anything in particular. Outside, the night has settled fully now. The sounds that remain are distant and occasional. A passing footstep, a door closing somewhere far down the street, then stillness again. You pause near the window, though the curtain remains in place. Your hand rests lightly against the fabric, feeling its weight, its quiet purpose. Beyond it, the world exists, but it no longer calls to you in the same way. The day has already given you what it will. You let your hand fall away. A widely accepted reality of this period is that when news of the war's end finally reached American communities, it brought an outpouring of celebration that filled streets, homes, and public spaces with sudden overwhelming energy. People gathered spontaneously, marking the moment with relief, joy, and a release of tension that had built over years. You can imagine that shift now, even if it has not yet arrived in your day. For a moment, you allow yourself to picture it. The same streets you walked earlier are now filled with voices raised higher than usual. The same windows no longer dimmed, but open to the light. The careful restraint of everyday life giving way to something more expansive. You do not linger there long. The image fades, gently replaced by the present moment, which remains quieter, more contained. You move toward the table again where the letters rest. They remain as you left them, their presence unchanged, yet still significant. You do not pick them up this time. You simply acknowledge them with a glance, a small recognition of the connection they hold. There is a lesser-known observation that when the war ended, many people experienced a complex mix of emotions, not only relief, but also uncertainty about what would come next. The return to peacetime did not immediately restore what had been before. Instead, it introduced new questions, new adjustments that would take time to unfold. You can sense that complexity even in the quiet of this room, in the way the future feels both open and undefined. You sit once more, your body settling into the chair with a familiarity that has grown over the course of the day. The wood supports you steady and unchanging even as everything else shifts. Your thoughts move slowly now, not in sharp lines, but in softer patterns that rise and fade without urgency. Some historians continue to explore how individuals transitioned from wartime routines to peacetime life, noting that the habits formed during years of scarcity and structure did not simply disappear. They lingered, shaping behavior long after the immediate need had passed. From where you sit, that idea feels close, not as a distant concept, but as something you can almost feel taking root. You glance around the room. Everything is as it has been, and yet you understand that nothing remains entirely the same. The day you have moved through has been shaped by small adjustments, by quiet acts of endurance, by the steady continuation of life within limits that are not always visible. You stand slowly, your movements deliberate, your body responding to the final transition of the day. You move toward the bedroom, your steps softer now, guided by memory rather than sight. The room greets you in the same way it did at the beginning, though it feels different now. The darkness is deeper, the quiet more complete. The bed waits, its surface smooth, its presence simple. You sit on the edge, your hands resting briefly on your knees. The weight of the day settles not heavily but fully. You remove your shoes, placing the thumb carefully where they belong. The small act feels part of a larger pattern, one that closes the day in the same quiet way it began. A reflective point sometimes raised by researchers is that the end of each day during this time carried its own significance, offering a moment of pause within a longer period of uncertainty. Rest was not just physical, but emotional, a chance to set aside what could not be resolved. You can feel that pause now in the stillness that surrounds you. You lie down. The mattress shifts slightly beneath you, then settles. The ceiling above is dim, its details softened by the low light. You allow your gaze to rest there for a moment, then close your eyes. The sounds of the day remain faintly in your memory. The factory, the street, the voices, the music, the letters. They do not disappear. They quiet, your breathing slows. The rhythm becomes steady, matching the calm that has gradually taken hold. Outside, the night continues, holding the neighborhood in its quiet, its darkness shaped by the same careful attention that has guided every part of the day. Inside, the house rests, and you rest within it. The day is complete, not finished in a dramatic way, but concluded through a series of small, steady moments that have led you here. And as you lie there allowing the final traces of the day to settle into something softer, you understand that this is how life continues even in times that feel uncertain. Not through grand gestures, but through quiet persistence, through the simple act of moving from one moment to the next. You lie there and for a while nothing asks anything of you. The room holds its quiet in a way that feels complete, as though every sound has found its place and chosen to remain there. Your body rests against the mattress, supported, still gradually letting go of the last small tensions it carried from the day. The darkness is not absolute. It has texture, a faint outline of the ceiling, a softer shape where the curtain meets the wall. These details remain just visible enough to remind you that the world has not disappeared, only dimmed. Your breathing slows. The rhythm becomes steady, unforced. The day begins to move through you again, not in sharp images, but in softened impressions. The factory returns first, not as noise, but as motion, a steady sequence of movement that fades as soon as it appears. Then the street, the quiet lines, the careful waiting. The letters, their presence gentle, now no longer pressing, simply existing. Each memory arrives, then settles. A broadly accepted understanding of this period is that the Homefront experience was built from these small repeated patterns, daily routines that rarely appeared dramatic yet carried the weight of a larger world within them. It was not one moment that defined the experience, but the accumulation of many, each one connected to the next. You can feel that accumulation now, not as a burden, but as something that has shaped the day into what it was. Your body sinks a little deeper into the mattress. The room remains still. There is a quiet detail sometimes mentioned in personal recollections that people often carried fragments of their day into sleep, not as full thoughts, but as sensations, impressions that lingered just at the edge of awareness. The mind did not need to hold on to everything. It allowed certain things to soften, to drift, to become part of something less defined. You can sense that happening now as the edges of your thoughts begin to blur. You shift slightly, adjusting your position, then settle again. The house holds you. The night holds the house. And beyond that, the world continues, though it feels distant now, no longer something you need to respond to. Some historians continue to reflect on how ordinary people experienced extraordinary times, noting that much of what mattered most was not recorded in headlines, but lived quietly in spaces like this. In rooms where the light was dim, where the sounds were soft, where the day ended, not with resolution, but with rest. From where you lie, that idea feels close, not as something to analyze, but as something to feel. Your thoughts slow further. They no longer follow a clear path. They drift. The images become softer still. The factory becomes only a rhythm. The street becomes only a sense of movement. The voices become only tone. Even the letters, which held so much earlier, now rest quietly, their meaning folded gently into the background. Your breathing deepens. The pause between each breath lengthens slightly, creating a calm that spreads through your body. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to prepare. The day has already been lived. A subtle reflection sometimes offered by researchers is that endurance during this time was not always about strength in the dramatic sense, but about the ability to continue through ordinary moments without losing a sense of self. It was quiet, often unnoticed, yet it formed the foundation of daily life. You can feel that quiet endurance now, not as something separate from you, but as something that has carried you here into this stillness. The room fades a little more, not disappearing, just softening. The boundaries between objects blur. The sense of space becomes less defined. You rest within it. The final thoughts of the day move gently through your mind, then begin to settle into something deeper, something less conscious. And now the pace slows even further. Your body grows heavier. Your breathing becomes slower, more even. The world outside continues to turn, but it no longer reaches you in the same way. It remains where it is held at a distance while you drift closer to rest. You feel the quiet. You feel the stillness. You allow it. And as you continue to settle, the day fades completely into something softer. Something that no longer needs to be remembered in detail. Only felt. Only held. Only gently released. You are here. Safe. At rest. The house is quiet. The night is calm. And there is nothing more required of you now. As the final traces of the day dissolve into the soft rhythm of your breathing, the world around you becomes less defined, more like a distant echo than a present reality. The shapes of the room blur gently, and even the faint outlines that once anchored your awareness begin to fade into a calm, unbroken darkness. You no longer follow thoughts. They pass quietly like distant footsteps that never quite reach you. The sounds that once filled your day, the steady hum of work, the quiet murmur of voices, the soft turning of pages, all settle into a single distant hush. Nothing stands apart. Everything blends into a calm that feels complete. Your body rests fully now, supported without effort, your breathing slow and even, each inhale and exhale carrying you deeper into stillness. There is no need to hold on to anything, no need to prepare for what comes next. The day has already given you everything it will, and now it gently lets you go. The house remains around you, steady and quiet, holding its place as the night stretches on. Outside the world continues, but it does so without asking for your attention, without drawing you back. You remain here, resting, drifting. The quiet deepens not as an absence, but as a presence of its own, something soft and steady that surrounds you completely. And as you settle further into that stillness, the last awareness of the day fades into a gentle calm. Nothing sharp, nothing urgent, only rest, only quiet, only the slow, steady rhythm of sleep approaching. Sweet dreams.